They sealed my gate with a plastic tag that read, "Emergency access do not remove," and for a moment I thought I'd stepped into some kind of bad movie. 3 strangers in cheap reflective vests, calling themselves HOA security, marched onto my porch like they had warrants in their pockets. My heart pounded not from fear, but from disbelief. This was my cabin, my land, and they were the intruders pretending to have power they didn't. Saturday had started normal enough. I was at my kitchen table with a county survey map spread out double-checking fence repairs I'd finished the week before. My cabin sits a good 200 yards outside the Willowbrook HOA line, which was the whole reason I bought this land in the first place. I wanted to avoid neighborhood politics board meetings and the petty rule enforcers who think trimming your bushes wrong is a crime. A smart move or so, I thought. Then I heard boots stomping up my steps. 3 guys in vests marked HOA Patrol banged on my door. The leader was a thick-set man in his 40s with that fake confidence some people wear like cologne. He shoved a crooked ID in my face, missing half the word sentry, and announced they were conducting mandatory emergency preparedness inspections. His partners walked off to my back gate and started threading a bright yellow zip tie through the latch. I pointed out the boundary stakes, the orange flags, in plain view, the fact that this was county land. He chuckled, like I just told him a joke, and said insurance regulations gave them authority to expand their drills. "You need to comply, sir, or we'll have to escalate this matter." That word stuck with me, escalate. I pulled out my phone and showed him the county survey app with GPS coordinates clear as day. "See this tree line, HOA, ends there. Everything past that creek is mine. You're trespassing." He barely glanced at it. His buddies left the tag in place and swaggered off, muttering into radios about Phase 2 protocols. I stood on the porch, staring at that plastic tag, my blood boiling. For the first time, a thought crept in. Maybe I'd made a mistake buying land so close to Willowbrook. Maybe they did have some obscure regulation that let them crawl onto my property. What if I was wrong? That doubt lingered like a bitter taste. The next morning, my neighbor Rebecca Shaw knocked on my door. She's an accountant, sharp as they come, and she'd already dug into the HOA's contracts. Laptop open on my kitchen table, she showed me the fine print Neighborhood Resilience Ambassadors, LLC, a so-called safety consultant hired by the HOA. Their contract only covered HOA common areas. No mention of private land. She even checked the state database, no security license, no permits. And when she pulled up the insurance program they claimed to follow, it specifically excluded non-member property. Her conclusion was blunt. They're running unlicensed, maybe even fraudulent operations. If they're filing reports on your land, that's insurance fraud. For a while I felt relief-proof I wasn't crazy. But that night, around 11:30, I woke to lights sweeping across my yard. 6 men this time, 3 trucks parked at my gate. They moved quietly like they were scouting a military target. I cracked my window and heard them on radios. Target site appears unoccupied. Beginning perimeter assessment. My skin crawled. They stretched bright striped tape across my driveway like it was a crime scene, planted cones marked emergency zone access, even mapped my cabin with cameras and charts. One of them tested my gate lock. This wasn't some drill, they were preparing for something bigger. I called my cousin Ray, retired Army. He showed up with a spectrum analyzer and a soldier's patience. Within minutes, he shook his head. "They're on frequencies they're not allowed to touch. That's a federal crime. And the gear they're using, military-grade encryption. Civilians can't legally own this." We spent the night recording everything: illegal transmissions, their fake zip ties, even theft when they yanked out the markers they'd planted. My doubt disappeared, replaced by anger. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a scam with teeth. The next day, Rebecca dug deeper and uncovered the motive. The HOA was chasing insurance discounts under a program called Ready Block. To get the reduction, they needed to log 40 hours of drills every month. But they didn't have enough common space to stage it all, so they pushed onto county land, filing fake reports and counting it as community compliance. If we refused, they'd lose their discount. Suddenly, it made sense why they were desperate. By midweek, the harassment turned uglier. Flyers plastered around town with my name and photo calling me a dangerous resident who threatened community safety. They left stacks at the grocery store, the post office even taped them to windshields. The headline screamed in red ink, "Extremist interferes with preparedness." I ripped one down my hands, shaking. They were trying to isolate me to make me the villain in my own town. Neighbors called confused, asking if it was true. For the first time, I felt powerless. Maybe I should have just let them zip-tie my gate and move on. Maybe I'd dragged this fight too far. But then, Martha Frank and Sarah, neighbors I barely knew, showed up at my door with their own stories. Fake patrols marking Sarah's kids' swing set as an evacuation site. Threats to inspect Frank's workshop for fire safety. Martha's pasture tagged as an emergency corridor. We laid out photos, bogus business cards, and letters signed by Lydia Barnes, the HOA's emergency preparedness chair. The so-called violation notices were pure fiction. That was the turning point. It wasn't just me anymore, it was all of us. 18 families met at the county fire station, spreading evidence across folding tables. Together, we saw the pattern, a coordinated scheme. Intimidation backed by fake law and insurance fraud fueling the whole thing. The room buzzed with outrage, and by the end of the night, we had a plan. The next morning, the fake patrol returned in force, 8-people traffic cones, a PA system booming from the road. "Attention, residents. This property is under mandatory safety inspection. Cooperate or risk enforcement." They tried to sound official, but the tone reeked of desperation. This time, though, they weren't alone. Ray and his sister Tessa, 15 years, Army comms had set up a full surveillance station with cameras, directional mics, and analyzers. Neighbors lined the road phones, raised live streams already buzzing online. I opened my door and told them flatly, "Everything you're doing is under federal surveillance." The leader, Trent Doyle, faltered. "Sir, interfering with emergency work is serious. Running fake security and jamming federal signals is the real offense," I shot back, holding my phone high, live stream rolling. They tried to block cameras, barking that unauthorized footage was prohibited. But the harder they pushed, the more cameras appeared. Online, thousands of viewers watched in real time as retired cops, lawyers, and emergency workers chimed in. That's not a licensed patrol company. Those radios are illegal. Then it happened, the collapse. A team member adjusted his vest, and Tessa's lens caught the inside label, a generic security vest rebranded with iron-on letters. Proof of misrepresentation captured in HD. Within minutes, their command radio crackled, "Abort protocols. Withdraw immediately. Media exposure active." They scrambled. Packed cones, yanked tape piled into trucks, and retreated behind HOA lines. The Intimidation Act had flipped into a public spectacle, and they knew it. By the next day, federal investigators were at my cabin. Real badges this time, from the FCC Enforcement Bureau. They reviewed Ray's logs of unauthorized transmissions, Tessa's footage, Rebecca's financial documents. The picture was clear unlicensed operations, communications crimes, and a fraudulent company siphoning HOA funds under Lydia Barnes's control. Agents uncovered that Lydia created shell companies, billed HOAs for fake security services, and filed fraudulent compliance reports to snag insurance discounts. Over $200,000 stolen, spread across multiple communities. And when property owners resisted, she unleashed Trent and his so-called patrol to intimidate us into silence. The investigation moved fast. By week's end, coordinated raids took down Lydia and Trent. Federal charges, communications violations, wire fraud, money laundering, even racketeering. Their scam unraveled in days once the spotlight hit. I stood on my porch that Saturday, the cabin quiet again, boundary markers untouched, no plastic tags dangling on my gate. The air was crisp, and for the first time all week I could breathe. They thought intimidation and fake authority could bulldoze private property rights. But in the end, exposure and documentation crushed them. And the lesson, always question authority, especially when it shows up wearing a vest that looks like it came from a thrift store.